Let me go back to your earlier point about those Japanese Americans who were interred in California and elsewhere during the height of World War II. It's been almost 140 years since the end of the Civil War. How do you administer something like this? How do you determine who gets what? Where does the process begin?
Well, it's the exact same way that we have broken treaties in this country with indigenous groups, the Choctaws, the Sioux, Cherokees, that go back even before the end of slavery. Some of these broken treaties go back as much as 200 years. But the administration is what has occurred with those groups, and the same thing can occur with Africans in America.
But specifically then, how do you determine who gets what?
Well, that's again, I keep referring to Congressman Conyers' bill, and that's why it's so important. He has said that we should set up a commission that would be funded by not that much money, about $8 or $9 million, that would study the impact of enslavement, as well as who gets the money, as well as the theory about whether or not it should go to groups of people, individuals, or both. And I really believe that it's going to go for like funds as well as individuals. It depends on the study, and it's almost premature to ask the question unless we have funded a study like that. And this is one of the things we try to do in this book, is try to advance the discussion on who gets the money.
I'm not sure if you can put this in terms of numbers, but how many slaves did we bring into this country?
Oh my God, the late historian John Henry Clark says we must begin the count at 30 million. One of my former professors, John Hope Franklin, said it's at least 40 million people. I estimate, you know, in terms of extraction out of Africa, somewhere between 40 and 50. At the time of the emancipation, there were approximately 3.5 million Africans in this country at that time, and that was 200 years. So the estimates are very, very difficult. You know, the best guesstimate is somewhere between, in this country alone, somewhere between 10 and 15 million people.
And how many African Americans today in the U.S., approximately?
Probably 85% of Africans in America today had ancestors who were enslaved.
Stover, Missouri, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
My question to Mr. Winbush, do you and your group plan to go after the other slave trading countries, namely the Brits, the Dutch,
yes,
the Spaniards, the Portuguese, those countries that was really involved in the slave trade and helped bring the slaves to this country?
Absolutely. In fact, there was a meeting just about a month and a half ago in Amsterdam, and there are lawsuits that are pending now that are going to be prosecuted in the next 2 years against England, France, Portugal, Germany for Southwest Africa, known as Namibia. So these suits are all over the world, literally, at this point. So the answer to your question is absolutely.
Boston, good morning.
Good morning. I have a question for the Mr. Winbush. Everything you're saying, I agree with you. I'm not racist or anything, but white folks seem to forget that we black folks paved the way in this country. We practically built this country up from the cotton fields to the railways. And if I know you probably visited Boston before. Boston has a history of African Americans, you know, migrating from the South.
Yeah.
But my thing is that I know a little bit of history of Lincoln when he, you know, was the one that helped free the slaves. But I mean, I'm kind of nervous, but my thing is that where is our 40 acres and a mule Lincoln promised us?
Well, it's interesting. Very quick response to that is that between January of 1865 and April of 1865, which was the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, some 400,000 acres of land were actually distributed to some 40,000 freedmen. Of course, with the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, his successor, Andrew Johnson, took all of that land that had been distributed by Sherman and others and gave it back to the plantation owners that actually owned the slaves that they were supposed to be giving the land to. So again, I think part of this is us really trying to read and understand history. And I think that most people would be very surprised at the linkages that even now exist with regards to the enrichment of insurance companies. One of the things I've learned is how Africans in this country, almost every major railroad in this country, and they are being sued right now in Chicago federal court, were built by Africans, literally what they call convict labor as well as slave labor for little or nothing. It was not all Africans worked on plantations, but plantation owners actually lent their slaves to railroad companies so that they could be built.
2 emails. There is no raging debate on reparations in this country. It will never happen. This country has no responsibility to hand out money to black people. What you should be doing is working on cutting the rate of black children born out of wedlock, cutting down on crime of black people, seeing that black children have a father and a mother in a home, and seeing that every black child gets a good education. That from a viewer in Arizona, and also this from Laura Marriott, who says, please ask Mr. Winbush if he really believes handing money to some blacks will end the out-of-wedlock births, STD high rates, sexually transmitted diseases, especially for HIV/AIDS, which blacks account for 50% of all cases, and other black-on-black crimes.
Well, you know, I'm really struck by the fact when people write letters like that and say things like that. What's amazing is how we could go to Northern Ireland right now and talk about Catholics and how they are just irresponsible people. Or if it would be like going to Kosovo right now, or for that matter, something even more relevant, Iraq right now, said these people are just lazy, they don't know how to run their country, they have out-of-wedlock births, and look at their economy, it's all in shatters. Not understanding history. And I'm not a historian, but I know for a fact that anybody who reads a good book on black history in this country will understand why the conditions in the African American community are the way they are now. But most people simply have not done that. I, as an African American, have had to read about George Washington throwing dollars across the Delaware River, or how Lincoln freed the slaves supposedly. But I was not required to know who Marcus Garvey was. I was not required to learn who Martin Delany was. And most white Americans don't have to read anything about African and American history, and I think that's something that does them a disservice.
Last call from Garberville, California. Good morning.
Yes, sir, Mr. Winbush. I guess I would support reparations, except for the idea that two points. The gentleman earlier mentioned other slave trading nations, most of them European, but the truth is there was also Africans involved with the slave trade, and there was Africans that had slaves themselves. It wasn't only white people. And another point that's a really major one is, what about, it wasn't like you said, supposedly Lincoln that freed this, the thousands of them, including my ancestors who died, who didn't own slaves at all.
Yeah, the best answer I could give to that, and it's the truth, is of course there were Africans who owned slaves. There were indigenous people who scouted for Custer at Little Bighorn. I recently saw the film The Pianist, in which Jews, as we know, helped place people in the Warsaw Ghetto, and we know that there were some Japanese Americans who helped process their own fellow countrymen during their incarceration during World War II. But certainly we wouldn't blame Jews for the Holocaust, we wouldn't blame the slaughter of Indians on Sioux, and we certainly wouldn't blame Japanese for their incarceration. So why should we blame Africans for their own enslavement? The fact of the matter is that European chattel slavery was going to happen with or without the cooperation of a tiny minority of Africans on the continent. And so I think this is a straw man when we raise arguments such as that.
What happens next?
What happens next is that there's going to be a series of lawsuits that are going to be taking place at the government as well as the corporate level. I hope to see Congressman Conyers' bill, H.R. 40, pass, and I think that you're going to continue to see the movement grow even bigger than it is right today.
Dr. Winbush is the editor of this publication, Should America Pay? Slavery and the Raging Debate on Reparations, a series of articles on the issue published by HarperCollins. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Steve.